What if the story you thought was over was actually just beginning? Imagine a story so intricate that every seemingly random moment is actually a carefully orchestrated divine symphony. Ruth and Naomi's journey has been filled with heartache, but in this final chapter, God turns everything around in the most unexpected way. Come along with me as we dive into the stunning conclusion of this story. Hey, it's Mary. Welcome back to Bible Study. If you've been enjoying these videos, please hit the subscribe button below. In our last session, we read about how Naomi hatched a bold plan to send Ruth down to where Boaz was sleeping so that she can essentially propose to him. Boaz responded in a kind way, but he lets her know that there is still one thing that stands in the way of their future together. Our story picks up at the town gate. In ancient Israel, the gate wasn't just a place to enter and exit the city. It was also a hub of official business where transactions and legal matters were settled. It's almost kind of like a court where the elders of the village would sit and preside over the business of the community. It's here that Boaz brings his request to be heard before the town elders. Ruth Chapter 4, verse 1. Now, Boaz had gone up to the town gate and sat down there. And behold, the Redeemer of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling a parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one beside you to redeem it, and I come after you." At this point, we learned that Naomi has a piece of land that belonged to her late husband. This land could be very profitable, useful for farming, business, building houses. Sounds good, right? Let's continue. And he said, this is the Redeemer, "I will redeem it." Then Boaz said, "The day that you buy the land from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance." Notice how Boaz words this. First he mentions the land, but once the Redeemer expresses interest, Boaz drops a bombshell. "Oh, by the way, you'll also have to marry a Moabite and carry on the name of her dead husband." It's a clever way of revealing the full cost of redemption, or some might even say, a way to test the Redeemer's heart. But here's what happens next. Verse 6. Then the Redeemer said, "I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it." So what does he mean he can't redeem it? This man realizes that he's being asked to perform a form of Levirate marriage, a tradition where a man would marry his deceased relative's widow to preserve the family line. In this case, if he marries Ruth, the child that they have would be considered the son of her late husband, Mahlon. This son would inherit Mahlon's property, which could potentially diminish the Redeemer's own inheritance. On the surface, it seems like a financial decision, but there's something deeper at play here. The phrase "impair my inheritance" actually means pollute in the original Hebrew. He doesn't want to taint his family line by marrying a Moabite. This is where things get interesting. This man, in front of the town elders, is willing to forfeit land and marriage to a woman who is beautiful, brave, kind, and has an excellent reputation, all because she's the wrong race. Now let's remember, this man is saying this in front of the townspeople. But we know that everybody knows that Ruth is a worthy woman because Boaz said it in chapter 3. She has an excellent reputation. Redeeming Ruth was about more than just marrying a woman and inheriting a piece of property. It was about helping his family members, women who were destitute, impoverished, and without protection in the world. The Redeemer's refusal is a classic example of someone misunderstanding the heart of God's law. The Lord prohibited intermarriage with pagan nations because it would invariably draw the people's hearts away from the Lord. It often led to them falling into idolatry, the worship of false gods. We're looking at you, King Solomon. But Ruth had already converted to faith in the God of Israel. The Lord was not concerned with her race or her nationality. but with her heart. But it's all good. This is another example of God's providence, where men look on the outward appearance, God looks at the heart. The Redeemer's rejection of Ruth was in fact God's blessing for her. He was clearing the way for Boaz, who was a worthy kinsman redeemer. Oh, and by the way, the Redeemer's name is never even mentioned in the text. In Hebrew, he's called Peloni Almoni, which literally means so-and-so. It's almost as if the author is saying he wasn't even worthy of a name here. And after this, we never hear from him again. So, after Ruth was just publicly rejected, Boaz announces that he is going to redeem the property and marry Ruth. But listen to what the men at the gate say. Verse 11, "Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, 'We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this woman.'" Don't miss this. The people of the town bless Ruth and pray that she would be like Rachel and Leah, two of the most respected and iconic matriarchs in Israel's history. They were the mothers of the 12 tribes. They are honoring Ruth as a woman who is joining the lineage that will build up the nation. This is huge. The very people who might have rejected her for being a foreigner are now publicly elevating her to a place of honor. Verse 13, "So Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son." Now let's fast forward 9 months. We find ourselves in a humble home in Bethlehem, where a group of women are gathered, marveling at an older woman who is cradling a baby. It's Naomi, and in her arms is a little boy that they've called Obed, which means serving or worshiping God. Let's take a moment to reflect on this. This is the same woman who had to leave everything behind just to survive, who lost her husband and her sons, and was so crushed that she told everyone to call her bitter because she was convinced that God had turned on her. She truly believed that her life was over. No family, no future, no hope of anyone to care for her in her old age. Verse 14. "Then the women said to Naomi, 'Blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher to you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him.'" Here is where the story takes a fascinating turn. I think this is beautiful. The Lord made Naomi a grandmother even though her sons were dead and had never had children. Because of Ruth and Boaz's marriage, the baby symbolically counts as Mahlon's son. She's holding her grandson, a living reminder that her God was indeed faithful and did not abandon her after all. The baby boy will likely inherit the property Naomi was trying to sell. Naomi, once destitute, will now have security and care in her old age. This just goes to show that God really is working all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes. He specializes in making a way out of no way. But we see this all throughout the Bible. There are dozens of examples of the people of God with their backs up against the wall, and the Lord shows up for them every time. Some were poor, some were widowed, some were barren, some were sick, some of them were even dead. We're looking at you, Lazarus. Psalm 34:19 says, "Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers them from them all." But God didn't only work things out for Ruth and Naomi. Let's look at verse 18. "Now, these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron, Hezron fathered Ram, Ram fathered Abinadab, Aminadab fathered Nahshon, Nahshon fathered Salmon, Salmon fathered Boaz, Boaz fathered Obed, Obed fathered Jesse, and Jesse fathered David." The birth of baby Obed is not only a turning point in the story for Naomi and Ruth, it was a turning point in the history of Israel. As we saw earlier in the series, the people of Israel were in a bad place spiritually at this time. But through Obed, a new line of kings begins, ultimately leading to King David, Israel's greatest king. And King David is part of the lineage of Jesus, our ultimate Kinsman Redeemer. This small, seemingly ordinary family event has monumental significance in God's plan of redemption for his people. I love how Tim Keller put it. He said, Ruth is pointing forward to the ultimate kinsman redeemer, Jesus Christ, who, since he became a human being, is our kinsman, but because he went to the cross, is our redeemer. Through this story, we see how God, in his grace and mercy, allowed a faithful foreigner, Ruth, to be counted as a grandmother in the line of Jesus, just as Ruth was included in Israel's genealogy. We as Gentiles are included in God's family through Jesus. Ruth and Naomi's story shows us that God is 100% in control of everything at all times, even when we can't see or understand it. God was working behind the scenes in Naomi and Ruth's lives, bringing about good even in their darkest moments. And he's doing the same for us today. If you're feeling like life has dealt you a bad hand, or you feel overwhelmed by your circumstances, be encouraged. The same God who worked through Ruth and Naomi's struggles is still at work today. His plans for you are good, and he is faithful to bring about his promises. Amen. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the book of Ruth. I hope you've been encouraged, challenged, and inspired. Don't forget to leave a comment below with your thoughts or any questions or comments or suggestions. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe for more Bible study videos coming your way soon. Until next time, grace and peace.